I'm going to help you make the business case for accessibility so that you can hopefully get your clients or coworkers on board with accessibility. Stick around to get lots of ammo to help you combat the most common accessibility objections. Now, knowing how to talk about accessibility is really important, especially because a lot of people have misinformation about it or they're totally confused by it. So I'm going to help you educate others and set the record straight. And you might learn something yourself today too. And I want to preface this with this statement. It is your job as a designer of documents or websites or as a website developer to bring up accessibility. And that's because you're the expert that they hired. And this is part of what you need to know about, just like you probably let them know about SSL and privacy policies if you build websites. And it also makes you look better and like the expert if you bring it up before they do, because it doesn't feel great when a client comes to you and asks you why you didn't bring it up. But it's worse if a client gets sued and then comes to you to ask, why didn't you mention this before? And you know what? In some cases, the client, after they got sued, went after the web developers because they never even brought it up. And in at least one case, they even went after the hosting company too. Okay, so the first objection is one of the most common ones. Now, if you've ever approached a client who isn't a government entity or an organization or a business that doesn't fall under the ADA or another law if they're in another country, then you've probably been met with accessibility is only a legal concern and the laws don't apply to us, so we don't need to worry about accessibility. Now, since about 2017, 2018, there has been a lot of ambiguity and a lot of upheaval in the legal space surrounding accessibility and who it applies to. And even if an organization does not have a legal requirement, it doesn't mean that it can't benefit from making its website and its documents and other content accessible. And here's why. Revenue is the first reason, and oftentimes that will get someone's attention when talking about accessibility. There's a lot of data about accessibility and how it can impact revenue. Okay, the Return on Disability Group's 2016 annual report, for one, stated that people with disabilities in the US have a total income of almost $873 billion and a disposable income of about $645 billion. Data from a study by the UK's Royal National Institute of the Blind showed that Tesco, which is a grocery chain, made additional revenue of more than £13 million a year after investing only £35,000 to make their website accessible. Now, £35,000 is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. But when your return on investment is $13 million a year, that's awesome. And then data from the Clickaway Pound survey, which is a UK study as well, showed that 71% of users with a disability will leave a website that is not accessible. Okay, so think of it this way. An organization may invest in a new website and maybe in SEO too. And they might also at some point send paid traffic to their website from ads. But if the site isn't accessible, that's potential lost revenue. Some people are going to leave the website and go to a competitor's site, and they may or may not come back. I mean, why would they if they can't read the content or they can't get around the website? And they may not take time to call the business and complain either. So your client may never even know that they lost a sale or that it was due to having an inaccessible website. Okay, in that case, accessibility was the missing link. So accessibility is good for business. All of that goes back to user experience, whether it's for a website or a document or other type of content. And what's good for accessibility is usability. The greater the usability, the more that all users, with or without a disability, the more that all users will benefit and stay on the site longer. And that in turn helps with SEO. Now, good usability also means predictability. And part of that means not making people deviate from the way that they're used to getting around a site. So for instance, when you design something, I know you want it to be unique, right? We all do. But if you design something so that someone has to think about it and think about what to do, or they don't understand how to use it, then that's poor usability. So for example, people are used to a navigation being at the top or on the left of a web page. So you don't want to move it elsewhere on the page. People are used to hyperlinks being underlined. Don't make them think about where to click. People are used to having visible menu options on the desktop. Don't put them inside a hamburger menu. Good usability also means that users can easily find content because it's visually styled well and it's tagged properly. Now, the visual styling is for sighted users, and they can find information quickly by visually scanning the headings on a page, for example. I mean, that's as long as they appear differently from the body text, maybe by using a larger text size and a heavier font weight. And then the tags are for users of assistive technologies, such as a screen reader, so that they can find the proper information quickly. Now, another part of good user experience is readability. And this is affected by contrast, typeface choice, white space, and text size. Readability means that sighted users won't have to strain to try to read light gray text on a white background, or maybe white text on yellow, which I see all over the place. And again, what's good for accessibility is good for usability. Captions are necessary for accessibility, but they also enhance the user experience. Providing captions is absolutely necessary for deaf or hard of hearing individuals, and it's a huge convenience to hearing individuals. And you know what? You might be surprised to learn, I know I was, that 80% of television viewers use closed captions for reasons other than hearing loss. And this was research done by Ofcom. Now, you might wonder, in what situations would a hearing person use closed captions? So let's go over a few. And you know what? You may have actually encountered some of them yourself. Someone could be in a noisy environment and having trouble hearing the audio. Maybe there's kids running around making noise. Maybe there's a lawnmower outside the window. Or maybe they're in a coffee shop. Maybe someone is in a quiet environment where they can't or they don't want to disturb anyone else. So maybe a library, or maybe they're sitting next to a sleeping baby or partner. They could also be someone who's not a native speaker of the language that's in the video. Someone could have trouble understanding a non-native speaker because of a heavy accent, or maybe a person who is speaking and has a speech impediment. And some people, and I know I'm one of these, as I'm definitely a more visual learner. Well, you know what? You could say, well, if it's not a good time for them to watch something, they'll just come back to the video later. But that's not necessarily the case. When you have someone's attention, you want to keep it, and they may not remember to go back and watch the video. Okay, now keyboard use is another aspect of accessibility and good user experience. And unfortunately, many websites are just not accessible via the keyboard. Individuals who have motor issues may not be able to use a mouse, so they use the keyboard. And then users of screen readers and other assistive technology also might be using the keyboard too. But there are times when a mouse user will appreciate the use of the keyboard. And that could be a mother with a child in her lap and she's trying to use her left hand on the laptop. Or someone has a broken right wrist or hand and they can't use a mouse. Now, I'm a mouse user, but I use the keyboard as much as I can. And that's because I find it so much faster and more accurate than a mouse. And again, when someone has a good experience on a website, they're more likely to return to it in the future. But they're also more likely to stay on the site longer, and that's good for SEO. And they're also more likely to say positive things publicly about that business. And that leads me to reputation. When something is good for business, it's also good for the business's reputation. And when the website and the documents are accessible, you know what? Most people won't even notice, but they will still benefit from it. Now, someone with a disability will notice, and that will leave a positive impression with them, and that will make the business look good. Okay, so then you've got good word of mouth, right? So think about reviews on Facebook, Google, Yelp, and these other review sites, right? Well, we actually have data to back this up too. The Australian Human Rights Commission showed that people with a disability are 3 times as likely to avoid that business and twice as likely to dissuade others from doing business with it when the site isn't accessible. So it's a boost to the brand because reputation is one aspect of branding. Now, another way that accessibility applies to all organizations is with communication. Okay, graphic design is all about communication. You know, unlike fine art, graphic design serves a purpose other than just being aesthetically pleasing, right? It usually needs to educate someone or engage someone or entice them to buy a product or service, or maybe take another action. And when the content is accessible, it will reach 20% more users. And don't we as designers want our work to reach the widest audience possible? Don't we want to help our clients with our work? I mean, of course, right? That's what we're really being paid to do. We're not being paid to just create something that looks good. I mean, we're creating something that looks good. We're being paid to create something that gets results or achieves a certain goal for the client. And when accessibility is incorporated into the design, then it means that more people can access that content and that they can also read and understand it. So, for example, let's say you design an infographic for social media or for a document or a website. If you don't take accessibility into account, then some people may not be able to read the text, or they might not be able to see an icon that's being used to represent information, right? These could be people with low vision. And maybe someone can read the text, but they can't understand some of the data because it's being conveyed by color alone. And that could be someone with color blindness. So the communication can actually be lost on about 20% of users and potentially more, especially if the business or organization specifically serves people with a disability. Accessibility also gives an organization a competitive advantage. Accessible websites can rank higher in Google search results than inaccessible websites. And there are actually a few reasons for that. One is that accessible sites usually have leaner code, so they load faster as a result. And when a site loads faster, Google ranks it higher in search results pages. And second is that accessible sites use proper tags. And so when someone finds that site through an online search, they might be more likely to stay on that site because the content was more relevant to what they were searching for. Now, when they stay on the site longer, that can help with SEO too. Okay, so that gives you a ton of information to make a case on just that one objection. Okay, so another common objection about accessibility is that it costs too much. Okay, so a legit manual website accessibility audit to find accessibility issues on a website isn't cheap. And that's because it involves a lot of manual inspection of the code, which is much more than an automated checker can do. And depending on the site and how many pages need to be audited, this process can take several weeks to months. And in addition to that, there's the cost of remediation, which means to fix the site as well. And that could also take several weeks to months. And remediation always costs more than incorporating accessibility into the process. But the costs of an audit or remediation do not have to be invested all at one time. So, for example, a smaller set of pages could be audited and remediated first, and then another set could be done later. And in some cases, it may or may not cost less to build a new accessible site and migrate the content over from the old site. Okay, but there are also non-financial costs to consider that do affect the bottom line at some point. And one of those is a negative reputation, which can lead to lost sales. The other thing to consider is that lawsuits are expensive. Legal fines and fees alone can range anywhere from $1,000 to $350,000 per claim. And those costs don't include the cost of remediation. And once someone files a claim, it doesn't mean a different plaintiff can't come along and make their own separate claim. Okay, number 3, you might hear, we're too small a business to be concerned with accessibility. Or we're too small for someone to sue us over accessibility. Or only large corporations need to worry about accessibility. We're not Target or Domino's. Businesses are not immune from accessibility lawsuits because of their size, and small businesses may be easy targets. I've personally been contacted by several web developers whose clients who were tiny businesses got letters from attorneys. And what happens is that businesses end up writing a check and they still have to remediate their website. Now, number 4 is no one has complained about our website, so it must be okay, or it's not a big deal. Remember that data from the Clickaway Pound survey? It showed that 71% of people with a disability leave a website that is not accessible. What are the odds that they're going to stop what they're doing and take time to send an email or call to complain about the trouble they had on your client's site? They might assume that your client doesn't care about accessibility because if they did, they'd have an accessible website. And they might feel discriminated against and not only never come back to the site, but tell others. Remember that other fact I mentioned. People with a disability are 3 times as likely to avoid that business and twice as likely to dissuade others from doing business with it when the site isn't accessible. So your client or your place of work might think that they would be kindly alerted to any issues that someone may encounter, but that is simply not the case. Most people will simply get frustrated, leave the site, and go do business with a competitor. And your client will be none the wiser. So just because someone hasn't complained yet doesn't mean there isn't a problem and doesn't mean that someone won't come along and slap them with a lawsuit either. Now, number 5 is we don't serve anyone with a disability. But yes, they definitely do. Potentially 20% or more of website visitors or readers of digital documents have a disability. And many disabilities cannot be seen, such as color blindness or epilepsy or hearing loss or ADHD. But clients can't even see the visible ones, such as a lost limb or broken arm, when people are coming to their website. So your client may only find out for sure if someone calls or emails to complain, or worse, they contact a lawyer who sends a letter or files a lawsuit. Number 6 is accessibility is for blind or older people, right? So you might hear that. Someone might assume that blind or older individuals are not coming to the website, so they don't need to be concerned about accessibility. But they should be. And you know what? People with blindness comprise one of the smallest groups of disabilities, and there are other disabilities with much larger numbers. Okay, visual disabilities total 7.5 million, and that includes blindness. But some of the other ones are color blindness, low vision, amblyopia, strabismus, and then we've got auditory disabilities, which total 11.4 million. And these include deafness and hearing loss. And then ambulatory disabilities, they total 20.7 million. Those could be chronic arthritis, a lost limb, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, stroke, or a broken arm. And then cognitive disabilities total about 15.25 million, and they include Down syndrome, dementia, dyslexia, autism, ADHD, and memory loss. And second, if your client or place of work doesn't specifically serve older people, they might not think that they should be concerned with accessibility. But people age 18 to 64 make up large percentages of people with disabilities. Let me give you some stats based on people in the US that are aged 18 to 64 with a disability. 9 million have an auditory disability. 3 million have an ambulatory disability. 9 million have a visual disability. 8 million have a cognitive disability. Another objection that you might hear is number 7. We don't sell anything that a blind person uses. Maybe the company sells power tools or racing lessons, for example, right? A blind person may indeed not be able to use those things personally, but they may be shopping online for a gift for someone else. Or maybe they're researching a product or service before buying. You might also hear, well, our site passes an accessibility checker, so we're good. But there are problems with automated checkers. They can help you find some good repeat errors on the website, right? But they can only detect about 25% to 30% of potential accessibility issues. The majority of those issues must be found through a manual check. So an audit is necessary in order to find out how truly accessible the website is. Now, another objection might be an objection for ongoing accessibility. And that could be, well, we had an audit and we fixed our site already, so everything's accessible. You know what? That's great if they did get an audit and then fix the site. But accessibility is an ongoing process, so it's not set it and forget it. And with the client updating content on the site, or a web developer or a web designer updating the site's theme and plugins and so forth, the accessibility of the site can change at any moment. And it doesn't help that most theme and plugin developers don't know accessibility practices. And that certainly isn't an excuse if something on the site is not accessible. Accessibility requires periodic monitoring to check for accessibility issues and then modifications to fix them. Okay, I've saved one of the best ones for last, or maybe one of my favorite objections for last. And that is, we'll just use an overlay. Businesses who say they can't afford accessibility often turn to using an overlay, thinking it's going to be a cheaper investment. There are tons of problems with overlays. I did an entire podcast on the problems with overlays, so be sure to check that out. But in short, since overlays are an automated tool, they can only detect about 25% to 30% of issues. Okay, but the bigger problems are that they don't affect the site. They can't fix things properly. They provide redundant or separate functionality. They result in poor usability. They provide a false sense of security. They result in decreased site performance. They give you less control over branding when they go to change colors for contrast purposes, if they do that at all. They open up the site to potential security issues. They can be seen as a form of discrimination. They can detect the use of assistive technology, which is a privacy issue. And really, they delay the inevitable, which is remediation.